I am Brian Mays. Follow along on our adventures chasing all kinds of game in the heartland of America. Our passions run from the North Woods rivers all the way out to the wild and wide open prairies. We are untamed, and wild is all we chase. This is the Amaazen Outdoors podcast.
Oh, that's a ski, dude. That's a moss ski.
There's one on the tree right there.
Oh, there goes another one. That's a good way to start the morning. I'm drinking some of my beer quick.
All right, folks, we are back for another episode today. Very special guest, so bear with me really quick. Hunt Ready. I want to mention Hunt Ready. Heath had gotten the opportunity to get into his new sidekick-ish vest, pared down, smaller game bag, still the same belt, still the same straps. Great little system. I've been using it for training. I really love it. If you're in the market, check out Hunt Ready's new upland vest. HW launchers, always a staple here at the podcast. I also want to mention a shout out to the Prairie Chicken Project and the Wisconsin Sharp-tailed Grouse Society, RPM Training Products, and I know I'm missing somebody, so sorry. But today, we've got Bob King. We are announcing our partnership coming up for December and January this year, hunting wild quail down in New Mexico. I wrangled the man, the myth, the legend, Bob King. He is on the show today, and I'm super excited for y'all to meet him. And we'll dive into what we have going on down south and what the season looks like. So enjoy the episode here with Bob. Let's roll. There we go. All right, folks, I have a very special guest with some big announcements today. I'm very excited for this episode. Bob King, welcome to the Amaazen Outdoors podcast.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if I need to use my loud yelling across a windy pasture voice since you're way up there in Wisconsin and I'm way down here in New Mexico.
Hey, I'm sure everybody will hear regardless. No, it's a long ways. It's a different landscape than the Northwoods for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be something really fun. You got a taste of it last year, and the big announcement that I think is really cool to make, and you can make this right on top, is that you're going to be coming out here this next year and working a lot of my land with your dogs, my ranches and my Llano Escotado country, and going to be a lot of fun. It'll be a new start for you. See how we do it. We've been at this for 30 years, so I've got a pretty good idea what works and what doesn't work. Of course, every day we would throw a wild spin in the air because we're dealing with Mother Nature, and we adjust as we go, and it's going to be a good long season for you, I hope.
I hope so too. I'm really, really excited to come down. Obviously, I love running my bird dogs, but you've been at this for 30 years in the outfitting business, and you know I've been at it for a few years, and so I'm just really excited to kind of learn. I mean, bottom line is learn, run bird dogs, do what I love, but also learn and see what you've done to kind of be successful in this game. But I guess the listeners don't know, but Santa Fe Guiding Company is your business, and you kind of offer all kinds of stuff. You've done this for 365 days out of the year, and for 30 years, and New Mexico kind of is a unique state that has so much to offer. Kind of give a little bit of the listeners a highlight on what you all do outside of the bird hunting game.
It's been a fun journey. It's been an absolute fun journey. I've guided everything. When I went into this, I knew I needed to be a full-time guide. I was a professional skier. I windsurfed for a living. I did scuba diving for a living. And when I opened this company up, I brought in all of my fishing and historical, cultural knowledge of New Mexico. There was actually a time while I was at the University of New Mexico, where I studied to be a New Mexico historian, a state historian. I had the chance to read in the archives that were written by the Spaniards way back in the 15 and 1600s. And I used that a lot with the federal government to, look at how the pastures used to be, and look how the landscape used to be. The Spaniards wrote about that, and it got me a huge interest even further in the outdoors. And this has been a lifelong experiment. And the experiment is how you can make a living in this state of New Mexico. It's a fact. This state is marginal habitat for humans and wildlife. So you better not count on something all the time. And it's a huge state. So you just have to study and watch and take the best, like currently, we're just been having 2 years of rain in the mountains around Santa Fe. So our blue grouse hunt is going to be really good this fall. And the fly fishing up on the Pecos River has been outstanding this year. So you got to bend with the wind and go with it. And this year, with our operations having expanded, I've got room for a new guy to come in with dogs, and I look really forward to meeting your dogs because, when you start bird hunting over dogs, it becomes all about the dogs. It's you make or break your day by your dog's activities, and you're going to bring down some great dogs. I had a chance to meet them last year on the curb when we met at the diner.
Yep.
And we're going to run their little fuzzy little butts off, and they're going to have a blast chasing these birds in New Mexico. Tell you, Brian, with your years in the experience of guiding and hunting over your dogs, this is an opportunity where I hope we're booking 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off, straight through the December and all the way through the January season. So it ought to be a blast.
Oh, it'd be a lot of fun. For me, it's a huge extension to our season. Our Ruffed grouse season. A lot of guys like to travel up here for the month of October. So I look at kind of that down south landscape is a great place to escape the winter, and I hope to see some of the listeners possibly down there. But what is a typical day in your neck of the woods quail hunting kind of look like? I mean, can you paint a picture for?
Hopefully while you're coming down here, one of the really good aspects of the day is going to be fun in the sun. We have a lot of nice winter weather down here. We're often hunting in the 50s, low 60s, with barely freezing in the morning. And that's in December and January. So hopefully when you're down here, you're going to get a really good wind burn with a red face. I think like you left here last year. I think you got a pretty good face exposure last year.
I got some vitamin D, man.
There might be days that are a little too hot to run the dogs, but hopefully they're all just perfect weather dogs, 45 degrees, and fair weather. And that's a great reason to come to the Southwest. Back in the days when I ran Barbary sheep hunts in February, I used to advertise. It was kind of like coming back for spring break. You escape the cold and snow and come down to New Mexico and hunt a spot and stalk desert sheep hunt, while it's 60 and 70 degrees each day. Spring break life, and play on that for people that are stuck up there frozen in the cold north. It's we're fortunate, and this state with the huge diversity of topography, from way down low in the deserts to the high alpine, we have just about every climatic zone there is, and at certain times during the year, those are the areas you want to be. And of course, the quail hunt, we're hunting down in the desert or out on the eastern plains. So like now, if you're out there scouting, it'd be hotter than Hades. But when we're there, I'll be just right for you. So that's the largeness of the state and the wide open variety of landscapes really does mean that you can ski in the morning and play golf in the afternoon, or better yet, go bird hunting.
Bird hunting,
it's yeah. So that's ought to be we're going to have, hopefully a really good hatch of birds like we're hearing about from the ranchers and the landowners and watching the rain gauges out there on some of these ranches. I expect to find scaled quail in good numbers, bob white quail hanging out in the corners around the old homesteads, a little slower bird, a little easier to hunt. So when you ask about our typical day, you're going to learn this and learn it well. We start 7:30ish, pound ground until lunchtime, cook an easy lunch out there in the field because at least the dogs need to take a break, and then hunt again after lunch and be back in hotel, motel situation in town, resting the dogs and resting up for another day. The limit of birds is 15 per day. That's hard to reach. You got to do a really good job of shooting to get 15 birds in your hand. That's a long shot. Personally, I like to have, enough for lunch on the third day of the hunt where we cook fresh quail in the field. I tell you, are you a cook, Brian? Are you going to look forward to cooking these birds out in the field?
I definitely am all right behind a grill or a cast iron, whatever it is. I'm not horrible in the kitchen.
The nice thing about making lunch out in the field with a bunch of hunters, everybody's hungry and nobody's complaining. The only complaints I ever saw over the years were the guys were on some sort of diet where they don't eat bread, so they pull their ham out of the inside slices of their bread. After that, everybody eats everything you put in front of them. So it's going to be a unique experience, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Your experience last year coming down here, you spent a little bit of time down the southwest corner of the state.
I did. I was.
Tell me where you went and what you did.
So we stayed kind of over by Gila area, so northwest of Silver City.
And what sort of birds did you get in up there?
Well, I always, when I go to the southwest part of this country for quail, there's always that, hey, I would love to put a male Montezuma's in my hand, or Merns, it's just a nostalgic bird. I'd argue they're the prettiest quail there is. So I tried pretty hard hunting some way rougher country than I'm used to, swung out enough. But the crazy part is I was finding gambles at, 6,000 plus feet. So it was really interesting. Here I'm trying to find Merns quail, and I keep running across Gamble's quail. So there wasn't a complaint from my part, but
finding them up in Montezuma country. What does it matter when the dog goes on point?
I will tell you, it was very much a reminder of like early season grouse hunting, because the cover was really thick where these Gambles were. Like kind of you come into a spot and you're like, okay, you look at it and like, oh, okay, maybe a Merns quail covey would be over here. And then the dog goes on point in the thickest spot in, all of these, pinyon pines and junipers. Pinyons and junipers. Yeah. I mean, the thickest, and the whole entire like 30 bird covey just shotters off the canyon walls. And I'm standing there with my gun going, I didn't even see a bird. It's just on the other side of this massive wall.
Was the noise.
It was like, am I grouse hunting in early, late September here or what? It was a riot. I mean, the dogs had fun, and honestly, I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the dogs. So everything kind of.
And you were here late season-ish. I mean, right when we met, it was.
Yeah, I showed up February 1st and stayed for the rest of the season.
Yeah, February 1st. Yeah. And that's always tough, right? Any bird that's out there where we could have been hunting it has probably been hunted. So you expect to see the coveys broken up. You expect to see them skittish. But the fact of the matter is this state's so large that even through the end of the season, we're usually hunting birds that hadn't been pushed because we're finding new areas that are holding birds we weren't hunting earlier. And for you to go down there on a raw trip and hike around in Montezuma country and get up some Gambles also in that high country, that's a real, I've got to say that's what's happened here. Global warming, do you want to call it that? Anybody believes in that? As a kid growing up, we hunted quail all over New Mexico. We hunted all species of quail. We never found a Gamble, say, north of Socorro down on the Rio Grande. It's a river-based bird primarily. And you didn't find them. You found them out in the mountains on the river courses on the creeks, but you didn't find them up in the mountains, and you didn't find them north of Socorro. And now we have gambles above Albuquerque heading up here to Santa Fe. Definitely they've moved up into the mountains where you often bump gambles cubbies when we're Montezuma chasing up there. So they've moved up and out from their traditional habitat. In that southwestern corner of the state where you're hunting, that's where we do our famous, our 3 species hunt, add scale to those 2 birds over 3 days. That's a really popular hunt because there's a lot of days where we actually get all 3 of those birds in one walk. And that's very unusual. And it just depends on the rainfalls and the hatches, whether that's going to be possible. But we're picking up the scaled birds because they're moving up out of the grasslands into the bottoms of the canyons. We're picking up the Montezumas that got pushed down into the bottom of the canyons for maybe snow. And of course, the gambles is overlapping up there naturally already. And it's pretty cool. It's, to truly get 3 species in one walk is unusual. And I'm sure that country around Cliff where you were was a darn good option to get in that. You might have come out of there with that if it was earlier in the season, maybe. But
last year was a really goofy year, and I think that it was the case 2 years ago. I was down in Arizona 3 years ago, and when I drove through 3 years ago, I saw snow in all of these places that I was hunting. This year when I was down there, we had one morning where it dusted, and we were hunting kind of north of Silver City, and I did find a covey of Mearns quail that morning. The dog did not point it. It came up over the rise, and there were a bunch of doves, and she would point the dove, and then dove flushed, point the dove, and I had my young dog. And then all of a sudden, 3 of them got up. She went to chase those, and 4 Mearns quail got up. And I remember swinging my gun, and it was a male, and it was just one of the prettiest sights I saw the whole time. We're in this really steep kind of bottleneck of this top ridge of the draw, probably 100 feet on each side. And, you got Mearns quail just going dive bombing down this ridge, and sun angles coming in. It was just beautiful. It was just beautiful. And, it didn't happen, but, I saw one, and I didn't leave empty handed, and learned a lot. I hunted down in southern Arizona, and it's just a different hunt than southern Arizona. The terrain is tougher. There's a lot more of it. So from an options perspective, it's kind of difficult for like a guy like me with coming down on a whim with, nothing to kind of look at things and go, hey, this is where I need to run the dog versus here. So it was a learning curve, and I was glad that, one of the last days I was able to find and get on a Mearns quail covey, regardless of whether or not my dog and I did things right. We still saw them. So it was fun.
When you drive through this country, there's a lot of good looking quail country. It's and not necessarily what you thought you were looking for, but to where quail could or should be living. And that's a tough thing, the huge expanse of lands, where to stop and narrow it down.
Yep.
Now, part of our outfitter and pro guide relationship is to make sure you're using proper terms on things. And here in New Mexico, we call that black-faced bird with the white spiral a Montezuma bird because it matches the Aztec Montezuma war mask. And the Spaniards named it that back in those archival papers, like in the late 1500s. They actually wrote about that bird as a Montezuma quail. And
that's the technical name for it.
It matches his mask. And then Mearns, he's a biologist like Gamble is, and all the Townsends and all the named biological diversity that was named in the 1800s by biologists running around want to put their name on things. So Mearns is what they hunt over in Arizona for some reason, but here in New Mexico, since this is all Spanish settled territory, we hunt a Montezuma quail. All right. And when we're hunting those birds, they're always real definitive. They get up from underneath your feet. They fly like a bob white with no tail, and the blackest colored one in the covey is the one you want to shoot. That's the trophy bird. And they live up there, well, like you saw 2 years ago, where the snow was. Our best Montezuma hunting country up there where you're talking about 2 years ago, when there was tons of quail up in that country, we couldn't get up in there because there was too much snow on the road.
Unreal.
Yeah. We found those trophy mule deer hunting in elk country. We were up in elk country, but I had a trophy mule deer hunter, and we were blasting cross canyons and really covering big time ground, looking for big time Mr. Right up in that country, and seeing all these 350 and 400 inch elk. Never quite finding Mr. Right as far as the buck went, but tons of quail, like so many quail. I had arranged for a B&B there to host hunters, and found me a barn to sleep in with the dogs, like you're going to be sleeping in somebody's old horse barn while you're out here, and
nice.
babysitting your dogs during the day. And but man, there was no way. Those roads were shut off. Too much snow that winter. And last winter, no snow down.
No snow, none. And that was kind of my point. Like, there was just nothing.
Brutal year.
And, for me, it's like one thing I can kind of discern cover, but when you have a variable like that, and I don't have the years of experience, and another reason why I wanted to, partner with you is, do you go up? Do you go down? Like, where are the birds going to be, when you don't have snow and you can get to 8,000 feet in January, like where do you go?
Absolutely. It's a mystery. It's a mystery. That's the pure joy, the absolute pure joy of hunting wild game on wild land. Anybody that thinks they're an expert out there, they're but a fool. As soon as you can tell me you're an expert in this, that means you never have a crop fail, or you'd always get all the ski area snow, so the big investments would be cashed in. It's us who are working with Mother Nature. Boy, it's a hit or miss. We drive roads looking for bar ditches that are wet, et cetera, and then try to put together formulas. And then we start hunting, and halfway through the hunting season, we might come up with a really good plan. So,
yep.
You're out here in February, that if we knew where something was going on, that's usually a pretty good bet. We've been hunting it through January and had these things cornered, cornered over there where they're easy to get to, and, and we're December, maybe we're doing a little bit more guinea pigging. And when you come out on your own, that's what we're doing. We're guinea pigging every day. We're out there looking for country and running our dogs because we're new to the country, and we walk in the door and we're like, let's go run these dogs in this great country and see what we find. So hunting Montezumas, and you got gambles. Way to go.
Yep.
I mean, that's
find the birds.
That's wonderful. Yeah. When the dog goes on point, he doesn't care,
Well, and my little pointer, she, it was funny. We were out on, it was hunting scalies, and she's just bumping scaled quail coveys, and she's young, I'm like, just let her knock them, she'll figure it out. And we got up into that Gambles country, and it was the run after I ran my young short hair, where we saw the Montezuma's quail. And I run her through another wash that I kind of knew there were going to be gambles in, because we just kind of pushed them off the edge of the edge of the canyon wall. And she goes on point, and huge covey gets up, and then she kind of busts off, and she comes back, and I never shot. She had a little Gambles quail she caught. She brings it right back. And I'm like, I look at this thing, it's like half the size of a regular, adult Gambles, and I'm going, okay, good job, girl, and then so we had the next morning I took her out and let her run, and and she immediately found that covey of quail in the morning, and she held that point. She was quite a ways out there. She held that point for a long time for me to get there. I shot, and I know I hit a bird and I couldn't find it. And we had such good luck recovering birds the whole trip, which was really, really cool. I literally there wasn't a bird that I knocked down that we didn't find. One we found the next day, because I knew I hit that bird, so I wanted to go back in there and try to recover it. But and we did, which was crazy. It had a busted wing, and it was in the same covey. Came back that night, and the dog caught it when the covey rise. I said, well, let's move on,
Nice. Nice.
But yeah, with Cece, I swung, and I'm like, it was kind of not a great shot, but I knew I hit the bird, and we kind of circled around, and my other older short hair was with her, and she slammed on point, and Cece slammed on point and honored. And I look below the noise of my short hair, and there that Gamble's quail is dead, stone killed, dead. And so we ended up recovering that bird for her too. So it was, you know, I don't mind one bit when you're running across birds. It really, especially quail, any species of quail with just that covey rise is so exciting. It's like, I can't tell you, hunting Kansas quail or Arizona quail or New Mexico quail, I still every year get stunned and just stand there with the gun at ready, and I just don't know which one to pick. And the covey goes, and I don't shoot a bird, but
that's
you know what? I just smile, man.
They've been bred to do that. Yeah, they've absolutely been bred to do that. Yeah, confuse you. Fly low, fly right back at you, fly low and fast. You know, there was this gentleman from the Santa Fe Institute I hunted with for years, and so Santa Fe Institute is something where it's like McKinsey Company, where you hire them to think about your situation and give you a really smart answer on what to do about it, right? So experts in thinking through stuff, you know. And this old guy George, we were out quail hunting one day, and the quail obviously, like when we flushed it, it ducked right behind some bushes and zigged left behind a bigger tree and split. And George looks at me and says, you know, those quail have only been hunted with a gun for less than 100 years. You imagine the hunter that comes through here 200 years from now. You know, you're never going to get a shot on that thing. You know, they're not going to fly. They're not going to fly where you can swing a barrel on them. And then when we do hit one, you know, it's so dry here, and they're relatively a tough bird, but they're really good runners, and they have no problem going down holes and stuff like that. All right. So we really want to get our hands on them as quick as possible. And sometimes it's just a fact. It does an egg beater thing out of space. It looks like you splatted it, and it hits the ground. And if you're not looking at the ground up there, you might not have seen him, but he shook it off and took off running, which means when the dogs get over there for the easy retrieve, you know, he's nowhere to be found, and he's not leaving much of a scent with as dry as it is, and blah, 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 blah. Why some quail get away. Sometimes a little bit later, the dog starts, you know, digging in a rat hole, and you're like, no, that's where snakes live. Quit digging in the rat hole, you know, but no, because the quail probably went down the hole, you know. It's, so, you know, the trials and tribulations of hunting a fast bird that doesn't want to get caught, right? You know, so we're lucky any day we get in birds. Doesn't matter if you're after Montezuma that day or when you found Gambles, but when you get them in your hand also, even better, you know, and over a dog, that's what it's all about right there. I could say over the years, I've put together some pretty good ideas how to get these birds to stop. And then maybe we can get even more points on these running birds. And when that does happen, that's when I feel like $1 million out there, you know, when we actually jammed up these birds and started getting singles pointed. The Holy Grail, you know, the height of it, I wish that would happen every day. You know, those hours where the humidity is a little bit higher and the temps are a little bit cooler. So all of a sudden the dog that was pretty good yesterday is really doing good today. And actually that's a good thing to remember. Our market, we deal a lot with hunters that want to bring their dogs out here hunting. And we have a lot of acreage we're hunting, a whole lot of lease and government land. So there's always room for client dogs. And in fact, more so these days than the old days, you know, it's 30 years into this. So these days, being the last 15 years, maybe, I really prefer to hunt with people with their own dogs also, because the pure joy of it, you know, we can use the same effort so we can get quail stopped and get points. But when that guy's dog gets the point and they shoot it and get it, that's a whole lot better. So when we're working with client dogs and they all come from somewhere that's more humid than here, all right, it doesn't matter where they're from, New York, they drove all the way across country, your part of the country, Texas, California, anywhere they come in here and they bring their dogs, it's kind of like taking a first-time fisherman onto a river. You better slow them down and teach them how to wade without falling down first. When their dogs get out there, they need to understand that it's so dry here that at first, Fluffy, he's really not smelling as good as he could have in a human environment for a bird that doesn't leave much olfactory. So we take it easy on the dogs, and we try to get them in situations where they're going to smell the birds. And then those situations, maybe in the evening, that last hour before dark, the relative humidity rises, or first thing in the morning while it's a little bit cooler and the relative humidity rises, you see Fluffy strike the birds, for sure hit them. And then they carry that into the drier part of the day. And that's a really, really super part about being a professional guide, is showing people things they haven't seen on their own, whether that's ski touring or Indian watching or whatever we're doing. But they're dogs. You know, they've spent all this effort raising these dogs and taking care of these dogs, and they've probably hunted over great dogs. That's probably why they have a dog, or they hunted over their friend's crappy dog and they wanted a better dog. You know, the old story, if you want perfection, don't get a dog, right? But the thrill for me as a 30-year professional guide in this business is showing people things they've never seen on their own. And when you throw a dog in the mix, our best friend, you know, man's best friend, and the guy got the kitchen pass to drive all the way out here and bring their pet dog or their dogs from the backyard out here and come quail hunt, to have them get on the birds and lock up and make points, that's the top of the game for me. It's one thing for our hard-footed, badass hunting dogs that have been out there all season to do it. It's another thing to get our friends' dogs onto it. And that's a real special thing. So when you come out here and you drove out here all the way out here and you hunted some different spots around and your dogs work good, well, it's because you've been practicing with them all summer. They're professional bird dogs. They hunt grouse. And you put them in enough situations where they had a chance to really smell these quail, not just a big covey. Big covey's always there. It's stinky. All dogs can find the big covey. But when it scatters and they lock up and get singles, you know that dog is really hitting on all cylinders, and that's something really to be proud of. It's a high achievement. There's levels of achievement in life, and we could run around like the Texans do and blast quail running down the road with extended mag Benelli shotguns and brag about killing hundreds of quail today. Or we could follow a really good dog and get single points and collect enough for dinner that day. And that's pretty cool too. You know, we definitely aim for solid single points and happy dogs, therefore happy owners. And, you saw it when you come out here and run the dogs. From year to year, you've seen a couple examples of that: moist years, dry years, etc.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah, it's definitely different, and you really can tell. I mean, at least I can when I'm around my dogs all the time, and I've got 4 of them, and I can tell which ones really excel and understand their nose. And for me, I had 2 young bird dogs that were just kind of coming on, and to see them really light up down there, which is just very, very tough conditions to hunt in comparison to where we're coming from now. The bird, I know a lot of grouse hunters that listen to this podcast, they're going to tell me, well, the king's the king, and I'm not saying it's not, but to hunt in that arid condition down there. And like you said, we did have some opportunities to bust some coveys up. And I will say, I was down there in February. I know I found some spots that birds had not been pushed, at least for an extended period of time. They may have been pushed early in the season, but they were not pushed for at least a few weeks. And it was really cool to see dogs light up and find birds and just watch that covey rise, to be honest with you. The shotgun pulling secondary for me.
There's a lot of land here, and there aren't that many hunters. So, you know, the holidays and early season, you can expect maybe there's more hunters out there hitting things, but all that whole long season, I can say just about every day we're working, we're trying to add spots on our schedule that we haven't hunted those birds yet this year.
Yep.
And when we walk out of there after
the same deal.
We're full-time guides, right? We're trackers. We track down trophy game. Well, I track people, and I track, you know, obviously I can tell somebody has been hiking around back in there since the last moisture. And if you knew when the last moisture was, you know, a lot of days when we come out of there saying, you know what, guys, not a person's walked down that arroyo here in the last several weeks. That's really cool. You know, and that's really what December kind of offers us as an earlier season where you're hunting birds that for sure haven't been hunted. Where in January, maybe we're focusing a little bit more where some concentrations are forming up, where we found where more of these birds are hanging out. We're spending more of our time in these thicker concentrations, driving 20 out into the desert and working singles for a bit, then going back through an area and grabbing another handful and putting them out into the desert, working those for a bit. Maybe not even moving the truck all day, coming back and eating lunch right there and hear the birds chirping in all directions and go back out. Well, there you're going to see a shotgun shell that some autoloader shot and didn't pick up, and maybe footprints, because we've been walking circles all over that country. And but that's one of our biggest blessings out here, and you're going to see that. You're going to work your schedule down to 1 day of hunting in a 10-day period or a 7 to 10 day period, and come up with your circle that you want to do. And there's no guarantee nobody else has walked around in there. In a lot of these places, the landowner could give permission, or it's a place where people found out there on the open state or federal lands. And, but it's very likely that when you go back there 7 days later and you're working through the calendar, those are your footprints leaving the parking spot. That's pretty good, and it gives those birds a chance to forget about hunters. It's when we drive on a ranch or a leased property. I see this mistake regularly. Guys hunt it every weekend or something. They go back and they go back and they go back. They hunt the same patterns over and over on these birds, and they're a little too smart for that. They're a little too wild. We've had plenty of childhood stories where we drove up and all 300 birds got up at one time when the truck was still 200 yards from the stock tank and took off flying east. It's like those late season pheasant and windrows. You slam the door, off they go. And you were mentioning your grouse. I can't wait to come up there and try that. That's out of Field and Stream magazine for us Western kids. Woodcock and true Eastern rough grouse hunt. That's like you're experiencing out here. That's another thing what this is all about, is going out and doing and seeing new places and new locations. And I too aspire that way. As a professional guide that knows, I think, just about every corner of New Mexico and all the different habitats for different game and different people, and for all the recreational activity purposes we might have been there, to go out and walk some of your country and look at these rough grouse and birds and hear them flushing and come out there saying, "Oh my God, how do you get these? Because it's so thick you can't even swing your barrel on it." Where we're dealing with, you can see Mexico and Texas and Arizona from the top of one hill. That's part of the thrill too. And for us professionals, the exploration and I call it the personal challenge of competing with Mother Nature. When you set off that morning on the lake.
That way. I like the way of looking at it.
It's
a different puzzle every day.
Compete.
I mean,
we're all competitive guys. I already announced that the competition in my life was big. Now I compete with Mother Nature. And well, here we go. Well, I know we're going to go slaughter them over there today. Yeah, right. That's a lot of the thrill in all this. Is you come up with the best plan, and sometimes you strike it rich, and other times you walk out there saying, "Well, we absolutely got our butts kicked." There wasn't a bird in that country. That's a thrill of it. That's a true guiding, professional thrill of it. It's Mother Nature, you just have a hard time guessing it. If you wanted a for sure deal, every time you go out, you're going to get some. You should probably go to one of those planted bird operations or go hunt in Texas over feeders or something like that. The wild game is, a little more, as we call it, fair chase. Yeah, it's more than that. And these quail are right up my alley on that. So we roll 2 weeks from now. We have antelope hunters on some of these ranches that we're going to be quail hunting. So we're going to have a pretty good scouting mission going on there, looking for trophy antelope and tracking roads and counting quail sizes, quail covey sizes. And then we roll into archery elk and September 1st, along with grouse hunting up in the high country. So there's a large diversity in landscapes. We're going to go from high alpine to out to the plains and down into the desert, all within the beginning of September. And by October, we'll be up in elk country, and then some mule deer hunting down in some canyon lands. And we might find quail. We've seen quail there in the past, but we're not going there to scout quail. But then come November, we have mule deer hunts on a lot of these same places and locations where, once again, we're glassing, we're long-range glassing for Mr. Wright. You know, we got some modern huntsmen coming through, and I'll explain that in a minute. But the trophy hunters, we spend a lot of time long-range glassing. But while you're doing that, you're listening. You're listening to quail chirp. You're getting covey sizes. You're tracking roads. You might actually see some quail driving down the road. But we start putting together patterns on things. So come quail season, you know, we think we know. And once here we are again, back to competing with Mother Nature. You know, you think you know, huh? that's a great aspect of it. You know, so we get out there and run our plays. If it doesn't work, if you feel like it's a good play, run the play again, run her again, and give it a shot the second day and see if you come up with those birds, see if you get them herded up into a spot where you can see them and shoot at them. You know, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. Your timing of the year out here this year when you come out, December and January, you know, it's going to go from 60-degree days, maybe a little warmer even, which is too bad because that those days when it's 65 or over for the dogs. I think in February last year you hit a couple of those.
I did.
You know, that's brutal. That's brutal. I mean, I don't know what we're supposed to do. You know, it's tough.
Well,
right?
Do what any guy does. I drove around and scouted, looked at country, put
Hunted
waypoints down.
Hunted early and hunted late and left the dogs in the truck and chased a little bit. But I mean, it's, you know, especially your northern dogs, you know, our dogs you have short-haired dogs also, but they probably grow some sort of undercoat up there where mine down here have bare skin. You know, mine up here would freeze if they went up there, you know, on a later season hunt. You know, mine would be shivering in their little, well, they don't wear dog boots, but maybe they'd all wear a vest or something and boots when they come up to hunt. You know, it's poor little desert dogs would be freezing, you know. where we see
have your little sweaters on for those dogs
over there. Yeah, poor little desert dog, you know, shivering over there. Well, start running, you know. We're going to see, you know, the fluffy dogs from up north, you know, a little bit of panting. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, when we see a dog openly panting, he's not scenting very well. You know,
nope.
Probably not getting the sniffer working as good as he could. It's time to let that dog not pant. You know, that's kind of my mark. And I don't know what you ran into last year, but I know in February we had some warm temps, and I just, you know, the quail are free to run during those hours, I suppose.
Yeah, I my goal every day was to try to run every dog for, you know, 30 minutes to an hour in the morning. And after that,
luxury.
Yeah. I mean, it was luxury. I had that pleasure.
Yeah. They love you.
Yeah.
They love you.
Yeah. You know, I was down there for 2 weeks. I had, you know, really there was no pressure to, okay, I got to go out and kill some birds today. It was about working the dogs. It's why I came down there. Yeah. Could I carry a shotgun and shoot? But you know, you talked about it, the weather. I mean, how many sunny days are there? And so we got both ends of the spectrum. I mean, I had wind and cold, had to bust out the jacket, you know, but I also hunted quite a bit in a t-shirt. And for me in February is called Living the Life. And so it was just my goal. I ran my dogs mostly in the morning, called it late morning, spent a lot of time scouting around, looking at stuff. And then, you know, if I'm, you know, maybe hunt in the evening, but again, if it's one of those days where it's, you know, it turns out to be pretty cold, I'm kind of done. You know, my dogs are tired, you know, by the evening. So, when it was hot, and it was all right to maybe push those birds a little later. I did, drop probably the younger dogs, let the older dogs sat quite a bit. It was just a joyride for me. I was done hunting and looking at country and looking at 2025 season, 2026 season, for the future, and enjoying life down there, because it's such a diversity. I went from, basically plains country, and then, down to the desert in a half an hour, or up in the Alpine in a half an hour, I was kind of up in, the Alpine, I guess you could say, in Gila and Cliff area.
In that part of the Gila, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
But you could get down to the Chihuahuan very quick,
Yeah, right away, just downhill.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Right on the fringe of the desert. When you're out here for a couple of weeks hunting, it's crazy to think, you're going to go hunting every day, because your dogs can't, the dogs can't handle it day after day after day for many hours each day. Just that little sweet hour when we go out on our own and we're scouting and hanging out. Yeah, we're running our dogs a little bit each day to stay in shape on the sweet hours of the day. But when we're working and we're doing 3 days of job and then 1 day off, we're hunting all 3 days, and we get a day off for the dogs to. And I've found that to be a really good program for my dogs. They've excelled on that. They hunt hard for 3 days, and by the third day, a couple of them out of the three are maybe a little tired than the others, but you start rotating a little bit more. Then they get a day off. Then they get to go do the drive-through at McDonald's and get a hamburger with cheese, but nothing else on it. They get a spa day in the hotel room, the hotel spa, that is the bathtub shower combination in there every few hunts. They get the spa day, and they get a pile of old towels dropped off so they don't slop up the room too bad. But next day they're ready to go again.
Oh yeah,
ready to go for another 3-day hunt, chomping in the bit. In fact, acting like jerks in the motel room. So after 3 days they lay around and watch football, and they do spa treatment, and they get hamburgers, and they're ready for another 3-day hunt. But when we're on our own, we hunt the sweet hours. Maybe during COVID, one of my best years out there is we were living remote, and one of my best guides and I were living out there, and we didn't care if we booked many clients. New Mexico was like discouraging a lot of people coming from out of state here, spreading the disease and the worrisome time of that disease. And so Carter and I were out there just living the life, camped out, running dogs the best hours of the day, eating well, like a real sportsman's holiday. It's what a special environment. That's what it's. Hopefully we can do things like that the rest of our lives, right? It's the time we spend with those dogs, the quality times we spend with those dogs. That's what really matters. And every day in the field, I think it's no different than anything else I guide. There's one powder run on the ski run. There's an hour where the fish were absolutely hitting. There's the shorter periods in the longer day that made the day.
Oh yeah,
and those are that's not all day. Sometimes it all happens pretty quick out there, but it made all the photos that moment. And that's why we get up and go again tomorrow. It's because we had that experience for that half hour. The dogs were rock solid, or an hour they were on them, and then we got that's life. It's life at its best. It's life at its best. So February, when you came out last year, we've talked about this, and that's a season that in our business we leave on the side burner. And 2 years ago, it was fantastic. And clients in the region that are really good quail hunters that know to answer my call when I say we're still in the birds means it's time to come back out for a February date. A lot of times in February, we'll get some early spring weather going. And what we thought we knew were masses of winter birds congregating in areas. Now there's pairs going off in all directions, even though they're not even going to breed until June or July, but they still pair up and they disappear. Where some years in February, by second week or third week of January, we're putting the word out to our best hunters with dogs. If you want to come back and enjoy another really good winter season, it's still happening here. And some years, about 50% of the years over all these years of guiding quail, maybe a little bit less than that, that January or that February 1st through the 15th is fantastic. Winter stays around, the birds stay together, and we get this extra long quail season that year. One of the last times I truly limited out with my dogs was on Valentine's Day. After I was done guiding clients, we still had a really good, heavy population of wintered up birds back in this valley. So I went there that morning all by myself and hiked way back in there, turned the dogs loose on them. And when I hiked out, I honestly had 15 birds that had been pointed. And probably the only time in my life I'll ever do that, you know. But that was a February winter concentration of birds on the 14th of February. Pretty cool, you know. It's rarely happens that way, but usually we're too tired after guiding to go back out and try again. That was the year I had to have some young dogs, so put the young dogs to work, and they got a mouthful for it. But sometimes those February hunts work really, really good for us. And definitely, since it's still open, we'd like to be in the field working, but it only matters if there's birds on the ground. And this year, we're going to be limited in where there's birds on the ground. But I've been on the horn with my ranchers, and I've been telling you this for the last couple of weeks.
Yep.
We've had some places that had a spring bloom, which means there was a lot of flowers, maybe on tubers and flowers and seeds that maybe hadn't hatched for a bunch of years. But when the spring moisture was just right, they did hatch. And when that happens, those flowers attract a lot of insects. And so when the baby birds, if they hatch and get out of their shell, there's a lot of protein for them to feed on. So we're focusing on a couple of those early bloom areas this year. Plus, since then, we've had some really heavy storms in places, real spotty. I mean, I run a couple 30,000 acre ranch type situations where one side of the ranch is green and the other side's not.
Really?
So it's real spotty, it's not region wide, you know, and region wide sometimes can kill us. There's been years in the past where I thought the bird numbers were so good, but then we had a 30-mile wide hailstorm roll through that country in June or July or whenever the babies were on the ground. Well, that was that. You know, it's so, you know, I quit like dreaming of the perfect weather situation. What matters is we get out there and find the birds that hatched or they didn't, because a lot of times our opinion of what we saw on the weather and we see growing on the bar ditch or we see grasses doesn't necessarily mean it was great for the quail. You know, we still don't know exactly what makes those quail hatch in good numbers, but we know when they hatch and they have a chance to hatch again, like a second hatching that year or maybe a third, then we're really fortunate. And like you've been watching on the weather, some of that southwest country might be good for these late summer birds this year. You know, we might find ourselves in January down there, but right now we're focusing on the Llano Estacado area, eastern New Mexico. And that'll all be scaled and bobwhite birds, not the 3 species hunt we're so well known for, but, you know, a really good quail hunt for scaled birds and heavy grass. Did you have a chance to hunt many scaled quail your first trip out here? You went a little bit in scaled country. Did you see some last year? You were down near where we might be hunting this year last year. You must have found some scaled quail there. They hold better. They hold better than any bird once you get them forced to hold. You know, I think you found out that when they're running, they're running.
When you get them in the right cover, they seem to want to play the game better. You know,
absolutely.
The thinner the cover, the faster they run. And not, you know, I don't know. That country, it's all cholla and grass. So it's kind of like if you can find decent grass and find birds, they played the game better.
Yeah, absolutely. In our high density grazing programs we do on a lot of our ranches, we'll have pastures that were pretty heavily slicked off, but all those scaled quail are standing around that pasture right now, kicking over cow turds, you know. And then when you jump on them, you want to try to push them into the patch that hadn't been grazed yet, you know, into the heavy grass. You know, if you hunt some areas in New Mexico near Texas where the oil fields are, you'll find those are some 3 and 4 flush coveys. In other words, they've been chased across that landscape by oil field workers and trucks and those extended mag, we keep talking about those guys. And those birds will land in a ball, and you get over there 50 yards from them again, wham, there they go again, in a ball again, 30 or 40 of them flying together downwind, and they'll do that a couple times before you'll get them stopped. That's real typical scaled quail. That's how people picture the scaled quail. We prefer not to get into those running gun battles with them like that. We prefer to get them jammed up if we can and get them pointed by dogs. You're gonna, by the end of this season, you'll have a good taste of that. Sometimes it's a change in the fauna that's there, the vegetation type that'll hold them. Sometimes a 2-track road will hold them. Certainly a graded county road will hold them. That's where we're working the bar ditch, like we're on a pheasant hunt.
Sure.
You'll find ways to get them to stop. That scaled bird is notoriously, as a kid, we didn't have dogs when we were kids. My father was an Air Force colonel and fighter pilot, and quail hunting was an aerial sport only. You were a total punk to shoot one on the ground. It was an aerial sport, and we would follow those quail. There'd be 50 of them running on the ground, or 100 of them running on the ground in front of you. Pretty soon there's just one. Well, as you would say, that means there's, all those others are holding tight behind you. So we would turn around and walk straight back towards the truck where we'd chase that covey of quail, and now we'd kick every clump of grass. And we'd get our handful of quail off that by doing that. So now with the dogs, we turn around and work down those lines and point singles, on the way back to the truck, and it's all the better. That's a good tip for hunting scaled quail, and it's one of the toughest birds, the biggest bird, hardest to kill bird, fastest of the running birds, I think. It's turn around and walk back through where they all hung up on you. That's for the listeners out there and want to DIY it out here. It's when you're chasing scaled quail, chase them over the horizon. But now when there's just one, turn around and hunt slowly all the way back. Yeah. Don't worry about it. Just turn around and hunt your way all the way back now, and hope you kick up the singles. I hope we find some big numbers of birds like that this year, like we're anticipating. I've heard some good hatch numbers already. So we're going into this with full intention this year. And Brian Mason's going to be out here with his awesome bunch of dogs working quail in some really great ranches and lands out here where, maybe we'll have quail lunch on the third day.
Well, the CPR certification was renewed today. License, fish and game conversation happened today on licensing. So the ball's rolling.
Can you believe that?
Yeah.
It's a very tough deal to have, and our BLM permit came through today as well.
Nice.
So, like a week of hard work, all of a sudden we really do have the documentation in hand for this to really fly. That game and fish thing, that was a tricky one.
It is.
I think that took a good conversation after 30 years of business with the game department to get them to go through with this and do it sensibly for us. I mean, it needs to be easy at some point.
Being an out-of-stater is difficult, and it'll be very interesting. I have to study the regulation book very, very closely.
I'll copy you. I'll copy you on one, and we'll scout out with a couple of my guides that have taken it reason a little lately, on the focus of it. But you not being necessarily a big game hunter or one that, well, I don't know. You'll find out. There's a pretty good book that has rules and regulations on it. So
yeah, I mean, I'm
not
unfamiliar to it. I have guided black bear hunts and have been a deer hunter in Wisconsin my whole life. So I understand it. I've hunted elk, but there's a few species in New Mexico that are non-natives, and I don't know. Like I said, it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it. A nice challenge, but. Yeah, I really appreciate the help. I mean, without your leverage, being an out-of-stater to get a license like that, it's very, very difficult.
I thought it was going to be easier than that. All right. And then I started getting the answers. And it was like, dang, come on now. I need this guy to come out here and I need this to work good. I promise you he's going to show up and do this, It's like me making a deal with law enforcement, right? It's like crazy, absolutely crazy. And you will. You'll
like, I don't have a warrant out for my arrest. I'll show up, I promise.
We're gonna be archery mule deer hunting in January, and we have 2 oryx hunts, and we have several Barbary sheep hunts going on. So you're gonna be around it. You're going to be around it, and holes in the schedule. You'll have
I know how to operate a gutting knife.
Different stuff.
And if I have to, I'll bring my pack. So
you don't need to do that. We got all those you can ever need. All the old Boy Scout packs are all in the back of the truck. Yeah. In the last 30 years, I've chosen to make my living the hard way. All right, and it's been really enjoyable. I really enjoy it. But what we do is really not that popular with people. People want planted birds. They want to for sure shoot things. They want to live in a lodge.
100%.
We camp out in tent. We look for game that doesn't want to get shot. It's we're fighting gravity a little bit the way hunters are going on. This week I saw some. I was flipping around one night and I saw an elk hunt. I looked at it. Well, that elk hunt was sitting in a blind over a water hole on somebody's property with a bow, waiting to hit a bull elk with an arrow. And the guy got one. It was a good elk hunt, and the business model is really good. It'd be easy to guide because you just put the guy out there in a blind and wait for an elk to walk up in the water hole, But boy, I'm glad I didn't do it that way. I don't have any desire for that. That's just below my pay grade to guide something like that. And it's a good business model once again. Don't have a problem with it. Over 30 years of business, I see it. It's making money off the land, harvesting animals. Perfect. But I'd rather camp out there where you hear the elk bugling and you get up in the morning and get on a foot race and chase that sucker hill and dale up and down the mountain. And maybe you get him or maybe you don't. And when you do get him, it's time to pack him out. Like I said, I've elected to do this a harder way. And, and these little dang quail that you're going to be hunting this year, they're, thank God there's more of them around the next corner, hopefully. When they all fly right and they all fly left and some fly up and some fly down and you're left there standing there looking at them and the dog, that funny look the dogs give us when they held a great point but nothing got shot. They look over the shoulder and they look at you like, and hopefully we see that because there's just another covey around the next corner. All right. So cheers to us.
Cheers. Absolutely. I
cheers.
Based on what I saw last year, and I scratched the surface, but I covered a lot of ground, if you know what I mean by that, with the state of New Mexico.
I know you did.
I barely scratched the surface, and I saw a lot of game all around. And based on what I've seen, at least on a radar, and you're backing it up from feet on the ground, there's a lot to look forward to this fall and winter.
Your happy attitude's going to work good with clients, and obviously with your dogs. People with an angry attitude usually has shitty dogs, pardon my language, but you're angry, the dogs know it. And your total willingness to come out here and go through a professional hunting program and joining us and working hard. And it's really going to be fun. And it should look forward to that. I think we'll have the birds to support that. It's by my estimations, by what's happening out here, I think we got a really good chance of having a great hunt this year. So I really look forward to it. Our season is November 15th to February 15th. December, January dates are most important. December hunters can hunt dove also, which can really be good out there. That can be a lot of fun. Sit around a water hole or hunting in the evening.
When does the dove season close?
It's open the whole month of December while we're quail hunting. So that's a nice extra resource and I generally book a lot of December dates with guys that really do want to hunt some dove while they're there too. January's serious quail hunting. That's all we're doing. Our dogs have had a month on their feet. We're chasing wild quail, period. And as far as bird hunts go, well, there's a sandhill crane hunt in there we do also, and there's some duck hunting that some of my guides do, but we with the short-haired dogs like you and I have, we'll be out in the desert chasing quail. quail, and more quail. Make the dog happy. And I was just sitting here, and this my old short hair right here, Georgia, is laying at my feet. He reminds you that if it's hot, go to the beach. Hunt the beach. That's her favorite place to hunt. That's along the river. So, you know, a little bit of quail chasing, a little bit of skinny dipping, a little bit of quail chasing, a little bit of skinny dipping. She says a girl can hunt all day on the beach. So have at it. Good deal.
So
good deal.
We talked a lot about quail hunting. I think we've built a nice picture. I really encourage the listeners, if they've hung along on the podcast this late in the game here, that they should check it out. But give the listeners what's the package look like, just so a real high level, and then how can they find you, Bob?
All right, Santa Fe Guiding Company. You find me online. My cell phone works everywhere I go. 505-690-2847. We are taking reservations now for December and January for both months. And program is we hunt you for 3 days. You lodge and dine locally in hotel, motel situation in the cities where we direct you. All those cities have an airport within an hour, maybe 2 hours from it. So you'll fly in, rent a car, and come to that city. And we make communications that evening around dark. And in the morning, we meet and we get after it. And we do that for 3 days. And we eat lunch out in the field. Like I say, at least I do. I cook great food. You know, who knows about this guy, Brian Vandermeer? He probably wants to serve, freaking Vienna sausages and sardines out there or something. But
I think quail fajitas sound really nice, but I'm pretty good at those.
Yeah, we like to eat sandhill crane, ribeye in the sky, and quesadillas and tacos and soup and salads. At least the dogs need a break. So we spend a little bit of time throwing out a Coleman stove, chairs, a table, eat lunch out there in the beautiful, sometimes hiding from blowing tumbleweeds in the shadows of trees for shade. We find a good lunch spot and we eat lunch. And then after lunch, we get after it again. It's super, super cold weather. We might not hunt till dark, but generally we're back in town around dark, and everybody can shake it off and go out to a restaurant and rest up and soak those weary legs in that hot bath and be ready to go in the morning. That's it. 3-day hunts, 3 days on, 1 day off. That's our goal.
Very good. Santa Fe Guiding Company.com.
SantaFeGuidingCo.com. Company is abbreviated, co.com.
Right on. Any last words for the listeners? Any closing thoughts, Bob? Anything we didn't touch on?
I usually end with a statement saying some years it's worth it and some years it's not to come out here on a quail hunt because of the marginal habitat like we originally spoke about. And this year we're going to have some good birds in eastern New Mexico. Definitely worthy of the hunt. And it'll be a different landscape. And the next time you come out, maybe we'll be in southwestern New Mexico on a really different landscape with 3 species of quail. But this year, we'll probably be in the Llano Escotado country and chasing scaled and bobwhite quail. And so there you have it, and worthy of it this year.
And I guess one last little thing, with that mixed bag, is it a fair shot that customers are going to see some bobwhite too this year?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Oh
okay.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep. They pretty much same hatch pattern as that scaled bird.
Sure. Yeah, I hunted. Yeah. I didn't hunt quite in that bobwhite country. I was a little bit further west. I didn't quite target them quite like you probably should. So I
studied these. I studied these prairie chickens out here and learned about all the birds and the clouds of birds that there were, and how these lesser prairie chickens survived, and didn't find much wording in any of those texts about the bobwhite quail. All right. A lot of it in the early cowboys in the 1800s about scaled quail, all right, but not much about the bobwhite. So I don't believe he's a native. I believe he was brought here out of Texas and Oklahoma by the homesteaders, and then since then has naturalized out there in a lot of these areas where we're hunting them.
Sure.
So don't quite buy into that it was their native habitat, the western edge of their habitat. I'm not so sure about that. But they can be there, and they're kind of like hunting Montezuma's quail. They're kind of the old man quail, the ones that don't run off too bad. Although I sit out there in our kitchen window and look at the quail as they come and go, and they run just like the scaled quail do. And I think bob white quail that are raised alongside scaled quail learn how to run like scaled quail too. But, we'll leave that up to you to determine, I think, a lot of times when you're hauling ass across a pasture and your dogs are 100 yards out in front of you, you're like, oh, yeah, man, these must be scaled quail, and they might be bob white too. They learn to run. They learn to run too, They're not so much like the Montezuma that usually never runs. He's an old man quail. It's these desert quail that run. It's a different bird. I suspect the bob whites will be pretty darn good out there in the right spots this year as well. So
right on.
We should be able to get both species. Yeah.
Yeah.
And scaled quail is my favorite. It's the largest, eats best. Big old fat bird, fast and strong.
If you give me the opportunity to hunt both, or only one out of the two, I'm gonna pick scaled quail.
That scaled quail, he's one size larger.
I just like they're a little bit more challenging, and I don't know. There's an affinity with them. I actually spent on my trip down there. I spent the majority of the time hunting scaled quail. It wasn't until I went to the Southwest, and I spent almost 10 days out on the Eastern Plains out there, and it's I know when I was in the Southwest hunting in the mountains, I was going, man, I kind of miss the Eastern Plains.
It's so wonderfully different when you can see sunrise and sunset out one side of the truck window and out the other in the plains. It's a totally different view of the world out there hunting these things, and it's easy to walk. It's one of my favorite places to guide hunters because there aren't any steep rocky ridges and rough terrain with it's flat, so it's really fun to walk. You can go out and do big loops in the pasture, and everybody can still see the truck when they're on the far edge of the loop. It's kind of fun that way. It's a good place to guide, and the country's good. And
big skies.
You say
just big giant skies,
big wide open skies, and see those coveys, and they don't fly like some of these other sorts of prairie grouse do, but they'll fly pretty far. We still see a lot of prairie chickens out in that country, and those suckers fly over the horizon.
Those native prairie grouse, man. Even the sharptails up here in our shrublands, man, they take off and they fly, quarter mile. You get out in the big prairies.
Way over there.
I've seen prairie chickens in Kansas fly by, I swear, a couple miles.
Just around the curvature, 11 miles away. Oh, real good.
Well, man, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I'm really looking forward to coming down. It's really an honor to work for you this upcoming season. So, I'll have contact information for some folks in the show notes, but we'll catch up soon, man. I really, really, really appreciate you coming on the show, Bob.
Yeah, what a pleasure, and nowhere near as much fun as we're going to have this season. So. Put this as episode 1. As we roll through the season, maybe we'll do some live remotes out there where we'll share some stories and a little bit more tactics and tips and disappointments or cheering, and learn a little bit more about the Southwest and this great state of New Mexico, the land of enchantment.
Absolutely, man. Thanks again. Well, are you ready? Are you going to come down to New Mexico and hunt some quail with Bob and I? Are you convinced? If so, check out SantaFeGuidingCompany.com. I will note I have some openings in October for grouse and woodcock. My personal dates are a little bit limited. My guide Jeremiah has some quite a bit of availability. So if you're still interested, we can take you on. We'd love to show you a good time chasing ruffed grouse and woodcock, and hope to see some of you in December and January down in New Mexico. It's going to be a lot of fun. Really honored to be able to hunt with Bob and work for him this fall. So hope to see some of you soon. SantaFeGuidingCo.com and Amaazen.com. We'll catch you on the next episode. Brian Mays, and I'm out of here.
There's the woodcock.